Chapter 7. Maddie read the sign stating that Oklahoma City was only 50 more miles. She was anxious to get home. What little stuff she had to bring back was being shipped separately, so only their clothes and other personal items were packed away in the trunk of her car. The local radio station was playing oldies but goodies that reminded Maddie of Jake with his sandy reddish blonde hair and green eyes. She really did miss him. He always understood her feelings, and he never prejudged her. Raindrops were hitting the windshield as the moon tried to peek through the clouds. The clock on the dashboard glowed brightly and lit the interior. It was approaching 11 o'clock. "We should be home by midnight," Maddie said aloud to herself. She knew her home would be very neat and tidy when they arrived. Susan, her housekeeper, would have come by today to air out the house and change the bed linens. Susan had been Maddie's and Jake's housekeeper since before Jake died. Since Jake's passing, Susan became a very important person in Maddie's life. Without Susan, Maddie would not have been able to travel as much and keep her home in Bethany, Oklahoma. She told people she was from Oklahoma City because most people had never heard about Bethany, a little town west of Oklahoma City. A bedroom community, people called it. A dwindling community, Maddie called it. But she loved living in Bethany. The small city had 2 large lakes, lots of trees, and many old, beautiful Victorian homes. The sign Oklahoma City next 6 exits woke Maddie from her thoughts, and the feelings of being home enveloped her. But she knew she had another 30 miles to go before she would actually be there. The radio station began to fade in and out, so she played with the buttons until she found her favorite local station. It had been almost a year since she'd been here, but it felt like only yesterday that she had been driving on this expressway. Although Maddie thought of her house and was worried that Susan might have left the windows open, the rain was pouring down and the wipers were attempting to keep ahead of the deluge of water. See, she must be home, because now she was worrying about the small stuff again. Her garden was also on her mind, and she hoped that Mr. Warden had mowed the grass today. Her house was an older home, in fact one of the oldest in Bethany. It was located close to a lake and was on a quaint little street lined with trees. If ever anyone asked what America was like, she would show them a picture of her street. Large oaks, lots of colorful shrubs and flowers. Her house was a 2-story, but with attic dormer windows, which made it look more like a 3-story. The brown shingle roof draped over the sides and down to the first floor gave it a Cape Cod look. The house had 5 bedrooms and 5 bathrooms and was over 40 years old. There were 3 fireplaces, one in the living room, one in the den, and one in the master bedroom. The garage would hold 4 cars, and there was a real swimming pool in the backyard, not one of those fake ones with a liner. The yard was filled with huge old trees that were taller than the house, way too big for her and Toby, but she had bought the house with Jake and was not about to give it up, not ever. Huge redbud trees lined the backyard, and she had a pond put in last year. Toby had so much fun feeding the carp every night and watching them grow. She wondered if Puffy would eat her fish, and with that thought, Maddie looked in the rear-view mirror and saw Toby curled up with Puffy, sleeping soundly. "We're almost home, big guy," she said, smiling and feeling good, very good. Maddie saw her exit ahead and clicked on the blinker. She took a left off the exit and drove through the town of Old Bethany, Oklahoma. There wasn't much of a town center. Older buildings lined the street, and with shops on both sides. But it was her home. It's always nice to know that some things never changed. After a few blocks, she turned down a quaint little street lined with trees and drove past her favorite house on the corner. It was a bed and breakfast, and the house was huge. She loved that house, and she felt immensely at home. Only a few more blocks. She took a couple more turns and was soon in Woodland Park and could see her house straight ahead. She pulled into her driveway and turned off the engine and sat motionless for a few minutes, admiring her house and the thought of being home. The porch light was on, and she could see that fresh flowers had been left in a vase on the veranda. Yep, Susan was here today, and she closed the windows. Mattie was happy to be home. She left Toby and Puffy in the car while she unlocked the front door. A quick glance revealed that several lights had been left on, which gave the house a cozy feeling. There was a little note welcoming them back and letting her know that Susan had filled the kitchen with groceries, including food for Puffy. A litter box had also been purchased and was now located on the back porch. Mattie smiled and thought about how much she really appreciated Susan and all her help. She decided not to attempt to carry Toby to bed. He was much too heavy for her now. She picked up Puffy and gently touched Toby's shoulder. "Toby, sweetheart, we're home," Mattie whispered. She didn't want to startle him. But up he jumped. "Home? All right!" And he was running for the house. Well, so much for gentleness, Mattie thought. She delicately held the startled cat and rubbed her head. "Let's introduce you to your new home, Puffy." The cat purred as Mattie stroked her. She closed and locked the front door behind her and placed Puffy on the floor. The cat looked around, smelled the freshly polished hardwood floors, and instantly ran up the stairs. "Strange," Mattie said aloud. "She acts as though she knows where everything is already." She double-checked the doors and windows and poured a glass of milk and headed upstairs. The car could wait until tomorrow to be emptied. Toby was already fast asleep in his bed with Puffy curled up at his feet. She walked into her bedroom and turned on the lights, and heard Jake call to her from the bathroom. "Hey, baby, how about washing my back for me?" he hollered. Mattie entered the bathroom and flipped on the light. The tub was empty and the room was neat and tidy. She turned and walked to her bed and took a deep breath. She wanted to cry, but the tears were gone. It had been almost 3 years, and she just couldn't cry any more. She picked up Jake's picture from the small bedside table and shook her head. Her heart and soul longed for him, but her mind wouldn't allow her to dwell on him any longer. "Sorry, Jake, but I have to say goodbye. I love you, but I can't do this any more. I have to go on. You'll always be inside me and Toby, but I can't do this. I have to let you go." She walked over to the dresser and placed the picture on top. She took a few steps back to admire Jake's new home. "But we'll start slow, okay? I'll move you away a few steps every day, until one day I'll have you next to Toby's bed instead of mine. Okay, Jake?" "Okay, my love," Jake said, but his voice was weaker than before, and Mattie knew she was finally beginning to heal. The next morning, Mattie woke with Toby and Puffy climbing on top of her. "Get up, Mommy, I'm hungry." Toby kissed and hugged his mother. He loved her so very much. He didn't remember his father. Toby was not quite 3 when Jake died. Nor did Toby really know the whole story as to how his father was killed. He didn't really care either. Toby was a normal 6-year-old little boy with normal 6-year-old desires and ambitions. "Okay, let's go downstairs." Mattie sat up and felt for her slippers on the floor with her foot, but Toby and Puffy were way ahead of her running down the stairs. As she walked down, she used the handrail and thought of Jake using it years before. "I've got to stop that," she told herself, only demanding it this time. With the thought gone from her head, she proceeded into the kitchen to fix breakfast for her son, Puffy, and herself. "Life goes on," Mattie said out loud. The rest of the week was spent getting reacquainted with her home and visiting her brother and his family. Doug was a few years older than Mattie and a teacher at a high school in Oklahoma City. He was tall with dark auburn hair and brown eyes. His daughters were identical twin girls named Skylar and Tyler. They were close to Toby's age, with long dark hair and slender bodies. They were the replication of her brother Douglas. Donna, his wife, was a real friend and sister to Mattie. Donna never had any sisters or brothers of her own, so she really enjoyed having Mattie around. Mattie was in her yard pulling weeds from the garden when the phone rang. The garden had been planted by her part-time gardener and handyman, Roy Warden. Roy was in his 50s, but as fit as a fiddle, and he loved to garden, so the relationship fit perfectly. She sat back, wiped away some sweat from her forehead, and grabbed the cordless phone. Toby was playing in the fort that Jake had built for him. It was the last home project Jake had finished before his untimely death. "Hello," Maddie said. "Miss Olson, this is Dr. Lewis from the agency. How are you, and how was your trip back?" Damn, she thought, I didn't want to go in just yet. "I'm fine, sir, and the trip was very uneventful, just the way I like it." "Well, we just wanted to say that we appreciate your talents greatly, and we would like to see you tomorrow in the office, if you can make it, that is." Maddie thought for a moment and felt it better not to disappoint him. "Certainly, Dr. Lewis, I can be there. I did call and check in upon arriving," she added. "I know, and everything is fine. I just want to discuss a new assignment with you and see if we could get you to accept it." "All right, how about 10 tomorrow morning?" Maddie said with a sigh. "Great, Maddie," Dr. Lewis said. "See you then." Terrific, Maddie thought as she stared at the phone. There goes the rest of my simple summer. The agency was close to the Botanical Gardens in Oklahoma City, and sometimes Maddie ate her lunch there. The annual pass was paid on time every year, even if it was just for her lunchtime pleasure. Today she would give herself a treat and go there to eat. Since she had planned to take a few months off, she had not yet arranged for babysitting services for Toby. She asked Donna to watch him today since they didn't live very far from the agency, and Toby loved playing with his little cousins. As Maddie pulled into the agency parking lot, she stared at the building. It was huge and impressive, about 10 stories high in some places, and about as wide. It was a city within a city, completely self-sufficient, with medical and dental facilities, stores, restaurants, and a full training division. It was very futuristic. She thought it interesting that most people would never know what was in this building. The outside was finished in green tinted glass mirrors, and the landscape was impeccable. The facility was absolutely beautiful. Maddie walked up to the reception station and smiled at Jolene. "Hey, girl, long time no see." "Please be acknowledged, Miss Olson," Jolene said very professionally and pointing to the device on the counter. "Yes, ma'am," Maddie said as she looked into the optical scanner. The scanner beeped a few times, then announced in a computer voice, "Confirmation complete, Maddie Olson cleared." "Thank you, Maddie. I appreciate your cooperation. Yes, it's been a long time, and welcome back. You've been missed. How's Toby?" Jolene asked, smiling. "Thanks, Jolene. He's growing like a weed every day. Gotta run. I'm late." Maddie waved as she dashed for the elevators. As the doors closed, she pushed the button for the 10th floor and sighed. She had really wanted to stay home today. Dr. Lewis met her as she stepped off the elevator. "Great to see you, Maddie. I've been waiting for you." "I can tell. Great to see you, too." They walked to Dr. Lewis's office, and Maddie plopped down onto the sofa. "So what's up?" "Well, it's complicated, Maddie, but we really need your help. First of all, you did a great job on your last assignment. Terrific as usual. You can really think up some doozies." He shook his head and smiled. "Remind me never to make you mad at me, Maddie Olson." "Okay," she responded with a slight giggle. "What is it about this next assignment that's so important? I usually get to stay home a few months before I go back out. I was just starting to get used to my mattress again." "Well, first we want you to go through an advanced training class on some new electronic devices that may come in handy someday. We're also asking that our women take a kickboxing class that also has some self-defense moves. Oh, and you're still not certified on a handgun, so those 3 things must be completed first. We figured about 2 or 3 months here and then off to the assignment, if you want it." Dr. Lewis was beginning to take on a more serious tone. "Can you tell me anything about it?" She was curious now. "Well, actually," he said, then paused. He sat down across from her on the matching couch. As they sat face to face, Dr. Lewis leaned forward and looked her directly in the eyes. As he took her hands in his, he said, "You know, Maddie, I would normally never put you in an assignment where I didn't feel you'd be safe." "I know that." "Well, I have to ask you now." He couldn't stand to look into her eyes any longer. He stood and walked to the window and gazed out. He picked up a glass from the small table and made himself a drink. Bourbon was required first. Maddie sat quietly, knowing that he would continue shortly, so she didn't make a sound. With a deep sigh, he spoke softly. The assignment will be in Georgia, and it's a TV evangelist. He paused again before finishing. Maddie, it's David King. My God, Jeff. Really? Her mind went blank for a second. That would be like trying to kill the President of the United States. Her face became completely white, and she felt faint. We know, but it has to be done. You'll be briefed on the reasons. All I can say now is that if you want your son to grow up and be free, you'll have to accept this assignment. He turned and looked at her. When you hear everything, Maddie, you'll understand why I'm asking you. This is a matter of national security. She knew she would not be told any more about the specifics unless she accepted the assignment. Her stomach ached, and she sat and pondered the offer. An answer would have to be given right away. Security was kept tight by not allowing people to walk around with additional information they were not using. Dr. Lewis sat back down across from Maddie, and they faced each other for what seemed like hours, not talking, just looking at each other. Everything went through Maddie's mind. Her life, her death, her son, her parents, and Jake. Dr. Lewis didn't say a word. He sat motionless with his drink in his hand. He watched the ice float around in circles and listened to the tingles as it hit the glass sides, and he wondered if he was doing the right thing. Finally, Maddie spoke. Okay, but I'll need help. You've got whatever you need, Dr. Lewis said, but he wasn't smiling. Maddie walked to the botanical gardens for lunch just as she'd planned. On the way, she stopped at her favorite deli and grabbed a soft drink and a huge sandwich full of calories. Her mind would not leave the thought of her son, Toby. How would he ever survive without her if something happened? Her 17-acre oasis came with waterfalls, deserts, and palm trees. She walked across the garden to her favorite spot next to a huge pond surrounded by large oak trees. A small path wandered through, but not many people visited this place because it was quite secluded. This was her private special place where she could sit and gather her thoughts and feelings and take care of her emotional well-being. A cool breeze blew through the trees, and the aroma of the flowers were enchanting. Maddie was concerned about her talk with Dr. Lewis, but just being home made things a little better. "Hello," a voice announced from nowhere. Maddie looked around and saw a man's figure approaching. You're sitting in my spot," he said. He looked to be in his early 30s, with reddish-brown hair and actually not too bad to look at. Maddie looked up at this intruder and was almost speechless. "Your spot?" "Yes, my spot. I've been coming here for the last 6 months to eat my lunch, so you're in my spot." He smiled at her. "I'm afraid you don't understand. You see, this has been my spot for the last 4 years, so I have first right of refusal." Maddie smiled back. "Well, where have you been these last 6 months?" He was still smiling. "To hell and back, as if it's any of your business." She smiled back again. The young man stood speechless for a few moments. "Oh, well, look, I didn't mean to upset you, honest. Let me introduce myself. I'm so sorry. I was only joking. My name is Nathaniel Edwards. How do you do?" He held out a hand. "My friends call me Nate. Really, I'll leave you alone. I apologize." And he turned to abruptly leave. Maddie felt strange and uncomfortable. "Hey, I'm sorry, too," she said, as he stood. "Would you like to share this spot, at least for today? And then we could work out some sort of custody schedule?" She sat back down and spread her arms out as to say welcome. Nate's laugh was gentle and soft. His smile lit up his face. His mannerisms were coordinated and graceful. He knelt across from Maddie and looked into her eyes. He instantly believed she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. When he first saw her, he almost thought he was looking at a goddess or an angel. He really didn't know what to say to her, and he'd never experienced that before. Nate always knew what to say. "I'm honestly sorry," he said. "I didn't mean to upset your lunch. Yes, I'd love to share this spot with you right now." He had never spoken to a woman like he was speaking to Maddie. He was at her mercy, and he was instantly in love. Apology accepted. Please have a seat. Maddie's smile was genuine this time, and he believed she was even more beautiful, if that was at all possible. My name is Madison Jane Olson, but friends call me Maddie. Maddie, I like that. Maddie. I do. I really, really do. Well, she said, I really, really thank you. They both laughed together. Maddie felt a little tingle in her stomach. She liked Nate. She liked him a lot. They talked over lunch and got to know each other a little better. Maddie discovered that he too worked for the agency, but she wasn't sure in what capacity. Not everyone who worked for the agency had assignments like hers. Some were bona fide temporary positions in various companies. That was how the agency was able to maintain its illusion. She knew what she could say and couldn't, and he the same. Lunch passed, and before either of them knew it, it was time to go. They shook hands and departed, but both kept the memory of that lunch very close to their heart that night, and secretly hoped to run into each other at the office.